A single dad janitor pushes his mop past midnight. A millionaire woman stays late, alone at her desk. Years of small smiles, quiet talks. A note left in a drawer. Then, boom. A photo leaks. Whispers turn to shouts. Why him? The board sneers. Choose your image, or choose him. She risks it all and takes his hand. For one shining moment, love wins. But a dark rumor hits. An old boss says the janitor once stole. Is it true, or a lie meant to crush them? A teen daughter writes a letter that could save everything, if it's not too late. Reputation versus love, power versus truth. When the past knocks and the headlines burn, will she still leave everything, or will one rumor sweep their future away? The steady swish of Samuel's broom echoed through the empty hallways of Whitmore Enterprises. His weathered hands moved with practiced efficiency across the gleaming marble floors, each stroke purposeful and thorough. The night shift had become as familiar to him as breathing over the past 5 years, and he took pride in keeping the prestigious building spotless. As he worked, Samuel hummed an old hymn his late wife Maria used to love. The melody brought both comfort and a familiar ache to his heart. The building's quiet allowed his mind to wander to Sophia, his artistic 16-year-old daughter who would be finishing her homework at their small apartment. A gentle smile crossed his face as he thought of the drawing he'd found on the kitchen table that morning, another of her beautiful sketches, this time of their elderly neighbor's cat. "You've got your mother's gift," he'd told her over breakfast, watching her eyes light up at the praise. Those eyes, so like Maria's, could still catch him off guard sometimes, even after all these years. The clock on the wall read 9:45 p.m. Samuel pushed his cart down the executive corridor, the wheels whisper quiet on the immaculate floor. The overhead lights were dimmed, except for the warm glow coming from the CEO's office at the end of the hall. Ms. Eleanor Whitmore was working late again, as she often did. Samuel had observed her over the years, always elegant, always composed, but there was a loneliness about her that reminded him of the quiet moments when he missed Maria most. He'd noticed how Ms. Whitmore's shoulders would sometimes slump when she thought no one was watching, the weight of running a billion-dollar company visible in those unguarded moments. He was emptying the recycling bin near the elevator when the distinct click of heels announced her approach. Samuel straightened up, offering a respectful nod as Eleanor Whitmore rounded the corner, her silver-streaked dark hair perfectly styled despite the late hour. "Good evening, Ms. Whitmore," he said quietly, reaching out to hold the elevator door as she approached. "Thank you, Samuel." Her voice was tired but kind, and she gave him a small smile that reached her eyes, something he'd noticed didn't happen often with others. Another late night. "Make sure you get some rest, ma'am," he replied, the words coming from a place of genuine concern rather than mere politeness. She paused briefly, as if surprised by his caring tone, then nodded. "You too, Samuel. Give my best to Sophia." The fact that she remembered his daughter's name touched him. He'd mentioned Sophia only once, months ago, when Ms. Whitmore had commented on a small sketch he kept in his wallet. The elevator doors closed, and Samuel returned to his work, moving through the building with quiet efficiency. In the conference room, the moonlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows cast long shadows across the polished table. Samuel was checking the room one final time when something caught his eye, a designer purse forgotten on one of the chairs. He recognized it immediately as Miss Whitmore's. She'd set it down during the board meeting he'd glimpsed earlier while cleaning the windows. Samuel picked up the expensive bag carefully, knowing it likely contained important items. The responsible thing would be to take it to security's lost and found, but something made him hesitate. He thought of Ms. Whitmore's tired smile, the way she always acknowledged him by name when others barely noticed his presence. Samuel looked at the purse in his hands and made a decision. He would deliver it to her personally, a small gesture of kindness for someone who had shown him consistent respect over the years. With gentle hands, he placed the purse in his cleaning cart and began pushing it toward the elevator. The night was still young, and this small detour felt right. As he pressed the button for the parking garage, Samuel hummed his hymn once more, the melody floating softly through the empty elevator car. The polished numbers above the door ticked downward, and Samuel thought about how Sophia always said that kindness matters most when no one's watching. His daughter had grown wise beyond her years, carrying her mother's compassionate spirit. The elevator chimed, doors opening to the garage where he knew Miss Whitmore's car would still be parked. His footsteps echoed in the concrete space as he made his way toward the reserved executive parking area, the purse now carefully cradled in his arms. Through the years of quiet nights cleaning these floors, Samuel had learned that sometimes the smallest acts of kindness could bridge the widest gaps between people's worlds. Samuel stood outside Eleanor's office, her leather purse clutched in his calloused hands. Through the frosted glass door, he could see the warm glow of her desk lamp. His knuckles hovered for a moment before he gathered his courage and knocked softly. "Come in," Eleanor's clear voice called out. Samuel opened the door carefully, stepping just inside the doorway. "Excuse me, Miss Whitmore, I found your purse in the conference room." Eleanor looked up from her computer screen, her reading glasses perched on the bridge of her nose. "Oh." She touched her side where she usually kept her bag, genuine surprise crossing her features. "I didn't even realize I'd left it." "Thank you, Samuel." He walked forward and placed the purse gently on her desk. "I thought it would be safer to bring it directly to you instead of leaving it in Lost and Found." "That's very thoughtful." Eleanor removed her glasses and set them aside. "Most people wouldn't take that extra care." Samuel shrugged slightly, his humble nature showing through. "It's no trouble, ma'am. Just doing what's right." Eleanor studied him for a moment, noting the quiet dignity in his bearing. "Would you like to sit down for a moment? You must be tired from being on your feet all evening." Samuel hesitated, glancing at the elegant leather chair across from her desk. "I wouldn't want to impose." "Please." Eleanor gestured to the chair. "I could use a break from these quarterly reports myself." After a moment's consideration, Samuel lowered himself into the chair, his work uniform a stark contrast to the luxurious office surroundings. "How long have you been working nights here, Samuel?" Eleanor asked, closing her laptop. 5 years now," he replied, his hands resting quietly in his lap. "Ever since Sophia started middle school." "Sophia? My daughter." Samuel's face softened at the mention of her name. "She's 15 now, an artist. She fills our little apartment with her drawings." Eleanor smiled, but there was a touch of wistfulness in her expression. It must be wonderful to come home to that. "This office." She glanced around at the expensive furnishings. "It feels so empty sometimes. And my house." She stopped, seeming surprised at her own candor. "The mansion on Highland Drive?" Samuel asked gently. Eleanor nodded. "Yes, 28 rooms, and every one of them echoes, 'I don't know why I'm telling you this.'" She gave a small, self-conscious laugh. "Sometimes it's easier to talk to someone who just listens," Samuel said. "No judgment, no expectations." Eleanor's perfectly maintained composure cracked slightly. "Yes, exactly. Everyone wants something from me here. The board, the shareholders, the employees. Sometimes I forget what it's like to just talk." Samuel's dark eyes held understanding. "I know something about lonely spaces," he said quietly. "After Maria, my wife, passed away, our apartment felt too big and too small at the same time. Every corner held memories, but there was this emptiness that nothing could fill." Eleanor leaned forward slightly. "How did you manage?" "Sophia," Samuel answered simply. "She was only 10 when it happened. She needed me to be strong, to keep going. So I did. We learned to make new memories, to find joy in small things. Her art helped us both heal." "That must have been incredibly difficult," Eleanor said softly. Samuel nodded. "It was. Still is sometimes. But God gives us strength when we need it most. And Sophia," his face brightened, "she has her mother's spirit. Strong, creative, full of life." Eleanor found herself touched by the pride and love in his voice. "You've done a remarkable job, raising her alone." "We get by," Samuel said modestly. "It's not much, our life, but it's honest. Sophia has scholarships for art classes now. She's going to go far, that girl." Eleanor watched as Samuel spoke about his daughter, struck by how different he seemed from the quiet man who cleaned the building each night. There was a depth to him, a quiet wisdom that made her expensive office feel somehow smaller. "Thank you, Samuel," she said suddenly. He looked at her, puzzled. "For returning your purse? For talking to me like a person, not a position." Eleanor's voice carried a vulnerability she rarely allowed herself to show. "It's been a long time since anyone has done that." Samuel stood up slowly, understanding that the moment was drawing to a close. "Thank you for listening, Ms. Whitmore. I should get back to my rounds." Eleanor nodded, watching as he moved toward the door with the same quiet dignity he'd entered with. After he left, she sat at her desk, staring at the purse he'd so carefully returned. Her fingers traced the expensive leather as she whispered, "No one's spoken to me like that in years." The morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Eleanor's corner office, casting long shadows across her polished mahogany desk. She arrived precisely at 7:30, as she did every morning, her heels clicking against the marble floors. The security guard had nodded respectfully as she passed through the lobby, but something felt different today. The usual weight of corporate responsibility felt lighter somehow. Eleanor set her briefcase down and settled into her leather chair, automatically reaching for the top drawer where she kept her daily planner. As she pulled it open, a small piece of paper caught her eye. It wasn't the crisp white stationery she typically used, but rather a simple lined sheet, carefully torn from a notebook. Her fingers trembled slightly as she unfolded it. The handwriting was neat and deliberate, each letter formed with careful attention. "Thank you for your kindness last night. It meant more than you know. S.O." Eleanor read the words 3 times, her throat tightening with unexpected emotion. Such a simple gesture, yet it touched something deep within her that had been dormant for years. When was the last time someone had left her a personal note? Not an email, not a formal memo, but a genuine handwritten message. She placed the note carefully on her desk, smoothing out its corners. Their conversation from the previous night replayed in her mind how Samuel's eyes had softened when he spoke about his daughter, the gentle way he'd listened when she'd confessed her loneliness. No judgment, no agenda, just pure human connection. Throughout the day, Eleanor found herself glancing at the note between meetings. During a particularly tedious budget review, she caught herself wondering what Samuel's daughter was like. He'd mentioned she was artistic. Did she take after her mother? What kind of art did she create? That evening, Eleanor deliberately lingered in her office past 6 o'clock, when most employees had already left. She heard the familiar sound of Samuel's cleaning cart in the hallway around 7. Her heart quickened as his footsteps approached her office. "Good evening, Ms. Whitmore," Samuel said from the doorway, his voice warm but respectful. Eleanor looked up, smiling. "Please, call me Eleanor, and thank you for your note. It was very thoughtful." A slight blush colored Samuel's weathered cheeks. "I hope I wasn't too forward." "Not at all." She gestured to the chair across from her desk. "Would you like to sit for a moment? Unless you're too busy with your rounds?" Samuel glanced at his cart, then back at her. "I suppose I could spare a few minutes." As he settled into the chair, Eleanor noticed how he sat straight-backed, dignified, despite his work clothes. "You mentioned your daughter last night. Sophia, right? You said she's interested in art?" Samuel's entire face lit up at the mention of his daughter. "Yes, she's quite talented, always drawing or painting something. Right now she's working on a series of portraits for her school art show." "That's wonderful," Eleanor said, genuine interest in her voice. "I always loved art class in school, though I wasn't very good at it myself." "What did you want to be when you were young?" Samuel asked, then quickly added, "If you don't mind me asking." Eleanor leaned back in her chair, a distant look in her eyes. "A teacher, actually. I wanted to work with elementary school children." She gave a small, self-deprecating laugh. "But the family business needed an heir, and, well, here I am. Do you regret it?" The question was simple, but it made Eleanor pause. No one had asked her that in years. "Sometimes," she admitted. "Don't get me wrong, I'm grateful for everything I have, but there are days when I wonder what it would have been like to shape young minds instead of profit margins." Samuel nodded thoughtfully. "It's never too late to make a difference in children's lives. There are always ways." His words stayed with Eleanor long after their conversation ended. Over the next few days, she found herself working later and later, their evening talks becoming a quiet highlight she looked forward to. Samuel told her about Sophia's struggles with math and her determination to improve. Eleanor shared stories about her own father, who had built the company from nothing but never lost his compassion for others. One evening, Samuel brought in a small sketch Sophia had done of their cat. The simple pencil drawing showed remarkable talent, and Eleanor found herself deeply moved by the teen's ability to capture such life in a few careful lines. "She has a real gift," Eleanor said softly, handling the paper with care. "Has she thought about art school?" A shadow crossed Samuel's face. "She dreams about it, but—" He didn't need to finish the sentence. Eleanor understood the unspoken reality of tuition costs. That night, as Eleanor's chauffeur drove her home through the city's glittering streets, she held Samuel's note close to her heart. The paper had softened from being handled so often, but the words remained clear. A smile played on her lips as she remembered how Samuel's eyes crinkled when he laughed, how his whole demeanor transformed when he spoke about Sophia. The limousine glided through the iron gates of her estate, but Eleanor barely noticed the familiar surroundings. Her mind was still in her office, replaying their conversations, treasuring each small detail she'd learned about this remarkable man and his daughter. For the first time in years, her massive house didn't feel quite so empty. She had something new to look forward to, someone who saw her not as the CEO of Whitmore Enterprises, but simply as Eleanor. The clock on Eleanor's office wall showed 8:45 p.m. She pretended to study the quarterly reports spread across her desk, but her attention kept drifting to the gentle swooshing sounds coming from the hallway. Samuel would be starting his evening round soon. She adjusted her reading glasses and shuffled the papers, trying to look busy. The sound of wheels squeaking on the marble floor made her heart skip. Samuel's cleaning cart passed by her door, and then she heard it, a soft melodic humming that made her freeze. The tune floated through her open door, simple yet haunting. Eleanor's hands began to tremble as memories washed over her. Sunday mornings in a small church, her father's deep voice singing that very same hymn while she sat beside him in a freshly pressed dress. "Amazing Grace, how sweet the sound." The words formed silently on her lips. She stood up, drawn to the doorway. Samuel was there, methodically mopping the floor in slow, careful strokes. His eyes were distant, focused on something beyond the gleaming tiles, and that beautiful humming continued. Eleanor didn't realize she was crying until a sob escaped her throat. Samuel looked up, startled. His expression shifted from surprise to concern when he saw her tears. "Miss Whitmore? Are you all right?" He propped the mop against the wall and took a hesitant step toward her. "That hymn," she whispered, wiping her cheeks with trembling fingers. "My father used to sing it, every Sunday without fail. I haven't heard it since he passed." Samuel's face softened with understanding. "Would you like to sit down?" He gestured to the small seating area near her office. Eleanor nodded, grateful for his quiet strength as she sank into one of the chairs. Samuel sat across from her, his weathered hands folded in his lap. "I'm sorry," she said, fishing a tissue from her blazer pocket. "I don't usually fall apart like this." "Sometimes a song can open doors we thought were locked forever," Samuel said softly. His eyes held a familiar pain. "I sing when I work because it helps me remember Maria, my wife. She loved music, used to sing in our church choir." Eleanor dabbed at her eyes. "How long has she been gone? 6 years this October?" Samuel's voice was gentle, touched with both sorrow and warmth. "Sophia was 11 when we lost her. Some days, singing is the only way I can keep Maria's voice alive for our daughter." "Does it get easier?" Eleanor asked, surprising herself with the rawness of the question. Samuel considered this, his expression thoughtful. "Not easier exactly. Different. The sharp edges of grief smooth out over time, but the missing that stays. You just learn to carry it differently." Eleanor nodded, understanding exactly what he meant. "My father passed 15 years ago, but sometimes it feels like yesterday. He built this company from nothing. But he never let success change him. Every Sunday, no matter how busy he was, we'd be in that little church, singing Amazing Grace. Your father sounds like a wise man." "He was." Eleanor smiled through her tears. "He always said, true wealth wasn't in our bank account, it was in how we treated others. I wonder sometimes what he'd think of me now." Samuel's eyes were kind. "I see how you speak to everyone here, from the board members to the cleaning staff. You treat all of us with respect. I think he'd be proud." His words touched something deep in Eleanor's heart. She watched as he stood up, moving with quiet dignity back to his mop. "I should let you get back to work," she said, rising from her chair. Samuel resumed his mopping, but the humming had stopped. Instead, he began to sing softly, his voice rich and clear in the empty hallway. "Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me." Eleanor stood in her doorway, watching him work. There was something beautiful in the way he moved, in the care he took with each stroke of the mop. His hands, strong and capable, guided the handle with the same reverence she'd seen in her father's as he turned the pages of his Bible. The fluorescent lights cast a gentle glow around Samuel as he worked, and Eleanor felt something shift inside her chest. This man, who cleaned floors by night and raised his daughter by day, who sang hymns to remember love and loss, he carried himself with a quiet dignity that no amount of wealth could buy. She watched him finish the section of floor, each movement precise and thoughtful. When he looked up and caught her eye, his smile was warm and understanding, as if he knew exactly what she was thinking. Eleanor smiled back, her heart full of an emotion she wasn't quite ready to name. Samuel clicked off the last light in the office building's west wing, his cleaning cart squeaking softly as he pushed it toward the maintenance room. The night shift always ended the same way, checking locks, turning off lights, and heading home to Sophia. But tonight felt different. His heart felt lighter, warmer somehow. The maintenance room smelled of pine cleaner and fresh mop heads. Samuel carefully arranged his supplies, making sure everything was ready for tomorrow. His movements were precise, methodical, a habit from years of taking pride in his work. He hung up his gray uniform jacket, replaced it with his worn brown coat, and picked up his lunch bag. The city bus was nearly empty at this hour. Samuel watched the streetlights blur past the window, thinking about Eleanor's face when she'd heard him humming that hymn. He'd seen something in her eyes, then a flash of recognition, of shared understanding. It reminded him of Maria, his late wife, and how music had always touched her soul too. 20 minutes later, Samuel climbed the stairs to their third-floor apartment. The smell of warm corn masa greeted him before he even opened the door. Sophia was waiting up for him, just as she always did. "Papa," Sophia called from their small kitchen. She was already in her pajamas, her dark hair pulled back in a messy bun, art supplies scattered across their kitchen table. "I saved you some tamales from Mrs. Rodriguez." Samuel hung his coat by the door and smiled at his daughter. "You should be sleeping, mija. It's late. I was working on my art project." Sophia gestured to the watercolor painting spread before her. "Besides, I wanted to hear about your day." She pulled out a chair for him and set down a plate with 2 steaming tamales. The familiar comfort of home wrapped around Samuel like a warm blanket. Their apartment might be small, with its worn furniture and walls that needed fresh paint, but it was filled with love. "How was work, Papa?" Sophia asked, sitting across from him. Her eyes sparkled with curiosity. "Did you talk to Mrs. Whitmore again?" Samuel paused mid-bite, feeling heat rise to his cheeks. "How did you know?" "Because you're smiling that special smile." Sophia propped her chin on her hands. "The one you used to have when you talked about Mama." Samuel set down his fork, his heart squeezing. "Sophia, it's okay, Papa." She reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "Mama would want you to be happy." "Tell me about Mrs. Whitmore." Samuel dabbed his mouth with a napkin, buying time to find the right words. She heard me singing your mother's favorite hymn tonight, the one about Amazing Grace." And she cried. Samuel's voice softened. "She told me it was her father's favorite hymn, too. We talked for a while about losing people we love." Sophia's eyes grew gentle. "She understands then." "She does." Samuel looked down at his plate. "But Sophia, she's the CEO of the company. I'm just the janitor who cleans her floors." "Papa," Sophia's voice held a gentle rebuke, "you're not just anything. You're the man who raised me alone, who works 2 jobs so I can take art classes, who helps Mrs. Rodriguez with her groceries every Sunday. You're the best man I know." Tears pricked at Samuel's eyes. He reached out and cupped his daughter's cheek. "When did you get so wise, mija?" "I learned from you," Sophia grinned. "Now eat your tamales before they get cold." Across town, in a different world entirely, Eleanor Whitmore stood in her kitchen. The marble countertops gleamed in the soft lighting, and everything was perfectly organized and completely untouched. She rarely cooked anymore. The kitchen was more for show than use. She filled an elegant ceramic kettle with water and set it on the stove, then selected a packet of chamomile tea from her extensive collection. The house was silent, except for the soft tick of the antique clock in the hallway and the gentle bubbling of heating water. Eleanor leaned against the counter, wrapped in her silk robe, and closed her eyes. Samuel's humming echoed in her memory. Such a simple thing, a janitor singing while he worked, yet it had cracked something open inside her, something she'd kept carefully sealed away. The kettle whistled, startling her from her thoughts. She poured the water over her tea bag, watching the liquid turn golden brown. Earlier today, she'd sat through hours of board meetings, listening to endless discussions about profit margins and market strategies. She couldn't remember a single word anyone had said. But she remembered every detail of her conversation with Samuel, the gentle way he'd offered her his handkerchief, the quiet strength in his voice when he spoke about his late wife, the dignity with which he carried himself. Later that night, in two very different bedrooms, sleep proved elusive for both Samuel and Eleanor. Samuel lay in his narrow bed, the springs creaking slightly as he shifted. Through the thin walls, he could hear the distant sound of traffic and the familiar hum of the building's old heating system. A strip of streetlight filtered through his window blinds, casting patterns on the ceiling. He thought about Eleanor's perfume, something expensive and subtle, like flowers after rain. How her carefully maintained composure had crumbled when she heard that hymn. How human she'd seemed in that moment, not like a powerful CEO at all, but just a woman who missed her father. In her vast master bedroom, Eleanor reclined against her imported pillows, surrounded by luxury she barely noticed anymore. The room was perfectly climate-controlled, the sheets were Egyptian cotton, and the mattress was custom-made. Yet sleep wouldn't come. She found herself thinking about Samuel's hands, strong, capable hands that weren't afraid of honest work, the quiet grace with which he performed what others might consider menial tasks. The way his eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled, as if happiness was something he knew the true value of. Both lay awake, separated by miles of city streets and social barriers, yet connected by something neither could quite name, something that felt dangerously like hope. Eleanor sat in her office, the evening sky painting golden streaks across the polished mahogany of her desk. Samuel stood nearby, leaning against his mop handle as they shared stories about their day. His eyes crinkled with warmth as Eleanor described a particularly difficult meeting. "So there I was," Eleanor said, gesturing with her hands, "trying to explain our quarterly projections when the projector completely died. The whole boardroom went dark." Samuel chuckled, his deep laugh mixing with Eleanor's lighter one. "Sounds like someone should have called maintenance," he teased, his eyes twinkling. "I should have. It would have given me an excuse to see you earlier." The words slipped out before Eleanor could stop them, and a faint blush colored her cheeks. Neither noticed Marcus Chen, a junior executive, passing by the glass wall of Eleanor's office. He paused, his eyes widening at the sight of the CEO and the janitor sharing such an intimate moment. Slowly, he pulled out his phone and snapped a photo. The next morning, Eleanor's heels clicked against the marble floor as she strode toward the main conference room. The message from the board had been urgent, demanding her immediate presence. As she pushed open the heavy wooden doors, she found all 12 board members seated around the long table, their faces stern. Eleanor, Richard Thompson, the head of the board, gestured to the empty chair at the head of the table. "Please, sit." On the table in front of him lay a printed photo. Eleanor and Samuel, caught in their moment of shared laughter the night before. "Would you care to explain this?" Richard's voice was cold, sliding the photo toward her. Eleanor's spine stiffened, but she kept her voice steady. "I don't see anything that requires explanation, Richard. I was having a conversation with a valued employee." Victoria Mills, another board member, let out a sharp laugh. "A valued employee?" He's the janitor, Eleanor. This kind of fraternization is beneath your position. Beneath my position? Eleanor's voice grew sharp. Samuel Ortiz is one of the most hardworking, dignified people I've ever met. His job title doesn't define his worth. This isn't about worth, Richard cut in. This is about the company's reputation. We've already received concerned calls from several major shareholders who saw this photo circulating. Eleanor's hands clenched in her lap. Circulating? Who leaked this photo? That's not the issue here. Bernard Walsh, the oldest board member, spoke up. The issue is that you're putting everything we've built at risk. The press would have a field day with this. CEO slums with staff. Can you imagine the headlines? I won't apologize for treating someone with basic human dignity. Eleanor's voice rose slightly. Samuel has worked here for 15 years. He's raised his daughter alone after losing his wife. Oh God, Victoria interrupted. You even know his personal history? Eleanor, this has gone too far. Richard leaned forward, his expression grave. Listen to me very carefully. You've spent 30 years building this company's reputation. Are you really willing to throw it all away for this? He tapped the photo with his finger. The board has the power to call for a vote of no confidence, Bernard added quietly. We'd prefer not to take such drastic measures, but if this continues, Eleanor felt her throat tighten. Are you threatening me? We're protecting you, Victoria said, her voice syrupy sweet. Think about it, Eleanor. What would your father say if he saw you destroying his legacy like this? Outside in the hallway, Samuel pushed his cleaning cart past the conference room. He'd started his shift early, hoping to catch a glimpse of Eleanor. Instead, he caught fragments of the heated conversation through the door left slightly ajar. Fraternizing with the janitor. Reputation at stake. Vote of no confidence. Samuel's hands trembled on the cart handle. He'd seen Eleanor's car in the parking lot and had hoped to share the news about Sophia's art scholarship interview. Now, hearing the anger and disgust in the board members' voices, he felt the weight of reality crushing down on him. He looked down at his worn uniform, at the calluses on his hands from years of manual labor. In the polished marble walls, his reflection stared back, gray at the temples, lines around his eyes, the simple dignity of an honest working man. But for the first time in years, that dignity felt like a burden. I'm just a janitor, he whispered to himself, his voice rough with emotion. She deserves better. The cart squeaked softly as he pushed it away from the conference room, leaving behind the muffled sounds of Eleanor defending him, defending what they'd found in those quiet evening conversations. Each step down the hallway felt heavier than the last, his heart aching with the knowledge that their gentle friendship had brought trouble to the woman who had shown him such unexpected kindness. Inside the conference room, Eleanor's voice remained strong despite the tremor in her hands. My father taught me that character matters more than status. If you think he'd be ashamed of me for seeing the worth in a good man, then you never knew him at all. But Samuel was already gone, disappearing into the shadows of the early morning building, carrying with him the weight of guilt and the crushing certainty that he needed to step away for Eleanor's sake. The warmth of their shared laughter from the evening before seemed like a distant dream now, fading in the harsh light of reality. The iron gates of Eleanor's estate creaked open as Samuel's weathered pickup truck rumbled up the curved driveway. Sophia pressed her face against the passenger window, her eyes wide at the sight of the magnificent Tudor-style mansion with its countless windows gleaming in the evening light. "Dad," she whispered, tugging at Samuel's sleeve. "Maybe we should have dressed up more." She smoothed her simple blue dress, the nicest one she owned, suddenly feeling self-conscious. Samuel adjusted his collar, checking his reflection in the rearview mirror. He'd polished his best dress shoes until they shone and worn the dark gray suit he usually saved for church. "We are who we are, Mija. Mrs. Whitmore invited us as we are." They parked beside Eleanor's sleek black Mercedes, the contrast between their vehicles stark. Samuel helped Sophia from the truck, carefully holding the portfolio of drawings she'd brought at Eleanor's request. His daughter clutched it to her chest like a shield. Eleanor opened the heavy wooden door before they could ring the bell. She wore a casual cream sweater and dark slacks, her silver hair loose around her shoulders instead of in its usual strict bun. "Samuel, Sophia. Please, come in." Her smile was warm but nervous. The foyer took Sophia's breath away. A crystal chandelier cast rainbow reflections across marble floors that Samuel had never cleaned. Dark wooden stairs curved upward, and oil paintings lined the walls. "Your home is beautiful," Samuel said softly, following Eleanor into a formal dining room where a long table was set for three. "It's rather too much for one person," Eleanor admitted, gesturing for them to sit. "I've asked Mrs. Chen to prepare something special tonight." An elderly housekeeper appeared with steaming plates of food that made Sophia's eyes widen. Perfectly grilled salmon, roasted vegetables arranged like flower petals, and fresh bread that filled the room with its aroma. The first few minutes were awkward. Silverware clinked too loudly against china. Sophia stared at the multiple forks beside her plate, unsure which to use. Samuel carefully copied Eleanor's movements, while Eleanor searched for the right words to bridge the silence. "Sophia," Eleanor finally said, "your father tells me you're quite the artist." Sophia glanced at her portfolio, propped against her chair. "I like to draw," she mumbled, pushing a piece of broccoli around her plate. "Would you show me after dinner? I'd love to see your work." Eleanor's voice was gentle, genuine interest shining in her eyes. Sophia looked up, surprised. "Really?" "Of course. In fact." Eleanor smiled, warming to the subject. "I have something I'd like to show you both after we eat." The conversation began to flow more naturally. Samuel told stories about Sophia's childhood adventures that had Eleanor laughing, her eyes crinkling at the corners. Sophia gradually relaxed enough to share her dreams of art school, encouraged by Eleanor's attentive questions. When dinner was finished, Eleanor led them upstairs. She opened a set of double doors, and Sophia gasped. The room was a private gallery, walls lined with paintings and sculptures. Soft lighting highlighted each piece perfectly. "This is my favorite room in the house," Eleanor confessed. "Though I admit I don't share it with many people." Sophia moved from piece to piece in wonder, her earlier shyness forgotten. "This one," she breathed, stopping before an impressionist landscape. "The colors are amazing." Eleanor stood beside her. "Would you share your drawings with me now?" Sophia nodded eagerly, retrieving her portfolio. She spread her sketches across a velvet bench, portraits of her father working, studies of hands and faces, detailed street scenes from their neighborhood. "Sophia," Eleanor whispered, "these are extraordinary." She pointed to a drawing of Samuel sleeping in his armchair, every line of his face captured with love. "You have a real gift." Samuel watched them bent over the artwork together, his heart swelling. Eleanor spoke to Sophia with such respect, treating her talent seriously. When Sophia shyly offered Eleanor one of her drawings as a gift, tears sparkled in Eleanor's eyes. "I'll have it framed," she promised, handling the sketch like a treasure. They moved to a sitting room where Mrs. Chen served hot chocolate with tiny marshmallows. Sophia curled up in a plush armchair, her earlier tension completely gone as she described her art teacher's encouragement. Samuel found himself relaxing too, watching Eleanor's face light up as she listened to his daughter. When the clock struck 9, Samuel reluctantly stood. "We should be going. Sophia has school tomorrow." Eleanor walked them to the door, her hand brushing Samuel's arm. "Thank you both for coming. It means more than I can say." Sophia surprised everyone by hugging Eleanor impulsively. "Thank you for showing me your gallery, and for understanding about the art." From her window, Eleanor watched their truck's taillights disappear down the driveway. The mansion felt different somehow, warmer, less empty. Sophia's drawing lay carefully on her desk, waiting to be framed. A smile played across Eleanor's face as she touched the glass, her reflection overlaying the darkened grounds beyond. For the first time in years, her home felt alive with possibility. The local community center buzzed with activity as Eleanor's silver Mercedes pulled into the crowded parking lot. Through the large windows, warm light spilled onto the cracked pavement, and the sound of laughter and music drifted into the cool evening air. She checked her reflection in the rearview mirror, noticing she had unconsciously chosen a simple cotton dress instead of her usual designer wear. Inside, The smell of homemade food filled the air. Folding tables lined the walls, loaded with steaming crock-pots and colorful casserole dishes. Children darted between clusters of chatting adults, their sneakers squeaking against the worn linoleum floor. Eleanor hesitated in the doorway, feeling oddly uncertain without her usual corporate armor. Samuel spotted her first. He was helping an elderly woman arrange paper plates, but his face lit up when he saw Eleanor. He quickly made his way over, wiping his hands on his jeans. "You came," he said softly, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "I wasn't sure you would." "Of course I came." Eleanor's shoulders relaxed as she met his warm gaze. "Though I feel a bit out of place." "Dad!" Sophia appeared beside them, her dark hair pulled back in a messy bun, paint smudges on her fingers. "Miss Eleanor, you have to try Mrs. Rodriguez's tamales. They're almost as good as Dad's." Before Eleanor could respond, Sophia had grabbed her hand and was pulling her toward a group of women near the food tables. Samuel followed, chuckling. "Everyone, this is Eleanor," Samuel introduced her simply. "No mention of CEOs or corporations." Mrs. Rodriguez, a round woman with silver-streaked hair, immediately pressed a plate into Eleanor's hands. "Samuel told us you might come. Here, try everything. My tamales first, then Rosa's enchiladas." Eleanor found herself surrounded by genuine warmth as the women drew her into their circle. They asked about her life with real interest, not the calculated networking she was used to at corporate functions. "So you work with Samuel?" Mrs. Rodriguez asked, spooning more food onto Eleanor's plate despite her protests. "In a way," Eleanor replied carefully, glancing at Samuel. "He keeps everything running smoothly at the office building." "That's our Samuel," Rosa nodded proudly. "Most reliable man in the neighborhood. When my car wouldn't start last winter, he fixed it right there in the snow. Wouldn't take a penny for it either." As the evening progressed, Eleanor watched Samuel move through the crowd. He seemed to know everyone, stopping to chat with elderly Mr. Chen about his garden, helping young mothers wrangle active toddlers, discussing soccer with a group of teenagers. In every interaction, she saw the same quiet dignity and genuine care that had first drawn her to him. Sophia flitted between groups, showing her latest sketches to admiring neighbors. Eleanor noticed how the community celebrated the girl's talent, encouraging her dreams without reservation. "She's got a real gift," a man introduced as Pastor Mike told Eleanor. "Samuel's been saving every penny to send her to art school. That's the kind of father he is." Eleanor's chest tightened. She thought of her own father, who had pushed her toward business school despite her dreams of teaching. Here, in this humble community center, she saw parents nurturing their children's passions, regardless of practical concerns. The evening wound down with impromptu dancing. Someone had plugged a phone into speakers, and Latin music filled the space. Eleanor watched in delight as Samuel twirled Sophia around the floor, both of them laughing. "Dance with us," Sophia called out, and before Eleanor could protest, she found herself caught up in their joyful circle. Samuel's hand was warm and steady on her waist as he guided her through simple steps. "I'm terrible at this," Eleanor admitted, trying to follow his lead. "Just feel the music," Samuel said softly. "Stop thinking so much." Gradually, Eleanor relaxed into the rhythm, letting Samuel's gentle guidance and Sophia's encouraging cheers wash away her self-consciousness. For a few precious minutes, she wasn't Eleanor Whitmore, CEO of a multinational corporation. She was just Eleanor, dancing with a man who looked at her like she was something precious, while his daughter beamed at them both. As the party began to break up, neighbors stopped to hug Samuel and Sophia goodbye. To Eleanor's surprise, several women hugged her too, extracting promises that she would come to their next gathering. "You're welcome here any time," Mrs. Rodriguez told her firmly. "Any friend of Samuel's is family to us." The night air had grown cooler when they stepped outside. Sophia skipped ahead, humming the last dance tune under her breath. Samuel and Eleanor fell into step behind her, their shoulders occasionally brushing as they walked along the quiet street. The streetlights cast pools of golden light on the sidewalk, and somewhere a cricket chirped. Eleanor felt a profound peace settle over her, different from anything she'd known in her world of board meetings and business deals. "Thank you for coming tonight," Samuel said quietly. It meant a lot to have you there. Thank you for sharing this with me, Eleanor replied. Your community is beautiful, Samuel. The way everyone looks out for each other, supports each other. I've never experienced anything quite like it. Their shoulders brushed again as they walked, neither moving away this time. Above them, stars peeked through the city's light pollution, and the distant sound of Sophia's humming floated back to them on the gentle breeze. The grand ballroom of the Whitmore Hotel sparkled with crystal chandeliers and flowing champagne. Eleanor stood before her full-length mirror, smoothing the silk of her deep blue evening gown. Her hands trembled slightly as she fastened her mother's pearl necklace. Tonight wasn't just another charity gala. It was the night she would show the world that Samuel Ortiz belonged by her side. The doorbell chimed through her mansion. Eleanor hurried downstairs, her heels clicking against marble floors. When she opened the door, her breath caught in her throat. Samuel stood there in a perfectly fitted black tuxedo, his silver hair neatly combed, his warm brown eyes uncertain but gentle. "You look beautiful," he said softly, a slight blush coloring his cheeks. Eleanor felt her face warm. "And you're quite handsome yourself." She noticed he was holding something. "What's that?" Samuel revealed a small white flower. "A gardenia. Sophia helped me pick it. She said it matches your pearls." His weathered hands carefully pinned it to her dress, and Eleanor's heart fluttered at his touch. The ride to the hotel was quiet, filled with nervous energy. Eleanor could feel Samuel's tension. "Are you sure about this?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. She reached over and squeezed his hand. "More sure than I've ever been about anything." As they entered the ballroom, conversation stuttered to a halt. Hundreds of eyes turned to watch Eleanor Whitmore, CEO of one of the city's largest companies, walk in with her janitor. She held her head high, her hand firmly in Samuel's. "Eleanor!" Thomas Whitmore, her brother, approached with a forced smile. "I didn't expect." "Well, this is certainly a surprise." "Thomas, you remember Samuel Ortiz," Eleanor said clearly, loud enough for nearby guests to hear. "He's my guest tonight." Thomas's smile tightened. "Of course, Mr. Ortiz." He gave a curt nod and quickly excused himself. Throughout dinner, Eleanor watched Samuel handle himself with quiet dignity. When confused servers presented multiple forks, he simply waited to see which one she used first. When snide comments floated from nearby tables, he responded with kind smiles. His natural grace made the wealthy guests' whispers seem petty and small. Then came time for Eleanor's annual speech. She rose from her chair, touching Samuel's shoulder gently before walking to the podium. The spotlights felt warm on her face as she surveyed the crowd: board members, business partners, society's elite. "Good evening, everyone. For 20 years, I've stood here talking about numbers, achievements, and corporate responsibility." She paused, her heart pounding. "But tonight, I want to talk about something different, something more important." Her eyes found Samuel's. "I'd like to invite someone special to speak with you, someone who has taught me more about dignity, faith, and true worth than all my years in business ever did." Murmurs rippled through the crowd as Eleanor extended her hand. "Samuel, would you please join me?" Samuel sat frozen for a moment, his eyes wide with surprise. Then, slowly, he stood and walked to the podium. The whispers grew louder, but Eleanor saw only him. Samuel cleared his throat, his hands gripping the podium edges. "I'm not used to speaking to crowds like this," he began softly. "I'm more comfortable with a mop than a microphone." A few gentle laughs scattered through the audience. "But I've learned something in my years of cleaning these fine buildings where you all work. Every night, after everyone goes home, I see the same things: empty offices that held important meetings, boardrooms where big decisions were made, and you know what? In the quiet of night, they're all the same. Just spaces waiting to be cleaned, to be made ready for another day." His voice grew stronger. "My late wife used to say that true dignity isn't about what you own or what title you hold. It's about how you treat others when nobody's watching. It's about finding joy in honest work, no matter how humble. It's about keeping faith when life gets hard." Eleanor watched as faces in the crowd softened, as diamond-draped women dabbed at their eyes. "I've mopped these floors for 15 years," Samuel continued. "I've seen CEOs cry in empty offices over failed deals. I've seen janitors share their lunch with hungry security guards. And what I've learned is that we're all just people, trying our best to make something meaningful of our lives." He turned slightly toward Eleanor, his eyes shining. "Some of us are blessed with wealth and power, others with simple gifts, like being able to fix what's broken or clean what's dirty. But the greatest blessing, I think, is finding someone who sees past all that, who sees your heart." Tears rolled freely down Eleanor's cheeks now. She didn't bother to wipe them away. "I stand here tonight, not as a janitor speaking to executives, but as a man humbled by love. By the courage of a woman who chose to see me, to know me, to care about my stories and my daughter's dreams. That's what true dignity looks like. That's what faith can do. That's what love really means." The ballroom was silent when he finished. Then, somewhere in the back, someone began to applaud. The sound spread like a wave until the entire room was filled with thunderous applause. Eleanor saw Thomas Whitmore standing, clapping with tears in his eyes. She stepped forward and took Samuel's hand, their fingers intertwining naturally. In that moment, standing before hundreds of the city's most powerful people, Eleanor felt something she'd never experienced in all her years of corporate success: pure, complete joy. The kind that filled every empty space in her heart. The applause continued as they stood together, hand in hand, two people from different worlds who had found something rare and precious in each other. Eleanor squeezed Samuel's hand, and he squeezed back, their silent language of love and trust speaking volumes in the glittering ballroom. The morning sun streamed through Eleanor's office windows, but its warmth couldn't penetrate the chill that gripped her heart as she stared at the newspaper spread across her desk. The headline screamed in bold letters, "Whitmore CEO's Shocking Romance with Janitor." Below it, a photo from the charity gala showed her holding Samuel's hand on stage, their faces lit with joy that now seemed painfully exposed. Eleanor's hands shook as she read the article's cruel words. "Sources say the distinguished Eleanor Whitmore has shocked society by falling for her building's maintenance man," it read. "Has the pressure of running a Fortune 500 company finally caused her to lose her judgment?" Her phone buzzed incessantly, with messages from board members demanding an emergency meeting. She closed her eyes, remembering Samuel's speech from last night, how his honest words had moved the crowd to tears. But now those same words were being twisted into something tawdry and scandalous. At precisely 9 a.m., Eleanor walked into the boardroom, her head held high despite the whispers that followed her. The board members sat like vultures in their expensive suits, their faces masks of disapproval. Thomas Richardson, the board chairman, didn't waste time with pleasantries. "This is a disaster, Eleanor," he said, slapping the newspaper onto the polished table. "Our stock is already down 7 points this morning. Major investors are calling, demanding explanations." Eleanor's voice remained steady. "There's nothing to explain. My personal life is my own business." "Not when it affects shareholder value," Sarah Matthews, another board member, cut in. "This company was built on reputation and trust. Your father understood that." The mention of her father stung, but Eleanor refused to show it. "My father also taught me that character matters more than appearance. Samuel Ortiz has more integrity than—" "Oh, please," Thomas interrupted, his face reddening. "He's a janitor, Eleanor." "A janitor! Do you have any idea how this looks?" The room erupted in overlapping voices, each board member eager to express their disapproval. Eleanor stood at the head of the table, watching these people she'd worked with for years reveal their true colors. "We've prepared a statement," Thomas continued, sliding a document across the table. "You'll announce your retirement, citing personal reasons. We'll handle the transition quietly." Eleanor picked up the paper but didn't read it. "And if I refuse? Then we'll be forced to call a vote of no confidence," Sarah said softly, almost apologetically. "We have the numbers, Eleanor. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." Eleanor looked around the room, at these faces she'd known for decades. Some couldn't meet her eyes. Others stared back with cold determination. She thought of Samuel, of his quiet dignity in the face of judgment, of how he taught Sophia to hold her head high no matter what others said. "You know what this company means to me," Eleanor said, her voice thick with emotion. "I've given it everything, sacrificed my personal life, my dreams of teaching, all to build something my father would be proud of." "Then protect it now," Thomas urged. "Sign the statement. Step down gracefully." Eleanor's fingers traced the edge of the paper. In her mind, she saw Samuel's face when he'd first opened up to her about his late wife, the way his eyes held such gentle understanding. She thought of Sophia's drawings, full of hope and possibility, pinned proudly on Samuel's small refrigerator. "No," she said quietly, then louder, "No, I won't sign." The boardroom erupted again, but Eleanor continued, her voice rising above the chaos. "If this company's reputation is so fragile that it can't withstand its CEO finding happiness with a good and honest man, then perhaps it's not the company my father meant it to be." Thomas's face turned purple. "Then you leave us no choice." He nodded to the company lawyer, who began distributing documents. "We're calling the vote now." The next hour passed in a blur of legal terms and raised voices. When it was done, Eleanor stood in her office one last time, packing her personal items into a box. Her assistant stood in the doorway, tears streaming down her face. Across town, in the modest apartment he shared with Sophia, Samuel watched the news unfold on his small television. His hands clenched as reporters dissected his background, questioned his motives, and speculated about his relationship with Eleanor. The comments section of online articles was even worse, filled with cruel jokes and accusations. "Papa?" Sophia's voice came from behind him. She'd stayed home from school, unable to face the whispers and stares. "Are you okay?" Samuel turned off the TV and tried to smile for his daughter. "I've ruined everything for her," he said softly. "Everything she worked for, everything she built." Sophia wrapped her arms around her father. "You didn't ruin anything. They did." But Samuel was already moving toward their small closet, pulling out their old suitcases. His movements were mechanical, his face set in lines of grief and determination. "Pack some clothes, mija," he said, not meeting Sophia's questioning gaze. "We need to leave town for a while, just until things calm down." "But Papa, we can't just run away. What about Eleanor? What about—" "Please, Sophia," Samuel's voice cracked. "Just pack. We'll stay with your Tia Carmen in Phoenix until—" He couldn't finish the sentence. As the sun set over the city, Samuel zipped up his small bag, each movement heavy with regret. On his nightstand, yesterday's newspaper showed a different photo: Eleanor looking at him on stage with such joy, such hope. He turned the paper face down, unable to bear the sight of what he'd destroyed. "It's better this way," he whispered to himself, though his heart screamed otherwise. She deserves her life back, her company, her reputation. Sophia stood in her doorway, her own bag packed but her face set in stubborn disagreement. But she knew that look in her father's eyes, the same one he'd had after her mother died, when the weight of protecting his child overwhelmed everything else. The morning sunlight painted long shadows across Eleanor's empty office. Her heels clicked against the marble floor as she walked to her desk, the same desk where she'd spent countless late nights talking with Samuel. Now, the silence felt heavier than ever. Her fingers traced the edge of her nameplate. Eleanor Whitmore, CEO, had been her identity for so long. Now, stripped of her title, she felt oddly light, as if a weight had been lifted. But that lightness brought its own kind of pain, the ache of missing Samuel's quiet presence. She opened her drawer, finding the note he'd left her that first night. His careful handwriting blurred as tears welled in her eyes. "Thank you for your kindness last night. It meant more than you know. S.O." Eleanor pulled out her phone, dialing Samuel's number for what felt like the 100th time. The same automated message greeted her. "The number you have reached is no longer in service." Across town, in a bustling public school, Samuel pushed his mop across worn linoleum floors. The work was familiar. Floors were floors, after all, but everything else felt wrong. The industrial cleaner smelled harsher than what he'd used at Whitmore Enterprises. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, a grating sound compared to the soft glow of Eleanor's office. "Mr. Ortiz?" a young teacher called out. "There's been a spill in the cafeteria." Samuel nodded, grateful for the distraction. Every quiet moment brought thoughts of Eleanor, her gentle laugh, the way her eyes crinkled when she smiled, how she'd listened to him as if his words really mattered. The guilt gnawed at him. He'd cost her everything she'd worked for. At home that evening, Sophia sat at their small kitchen table, pushing her rice around her plate. "Dad, this is ridiculous. You need to call her." Samuel kept his eyes on his own plate. "Sophia, mi amor, you don't understand. What I did to her." "What you did?" Sophia's fork clattered against her plate. "You showed her what real love looks like. You made her happier than she's been in years. Everyone could see that at the gala. And look what it cost her." Samuel's voice was rough with emotion. "Her company, her reputation. She doesn't care about any of that." Sophia stood up, her chair scraping against the floor. "You should have seen her face when she looked at you. The way she smiled when you gave that speech." She pulled out her sketchbook, flipping to a drawing she'd made at the gala. Eleanor and Samuel on stage, their hands clasped, both radiant with joy. Samuel's throat tightened. "Sometimes love means staying away, protecting the ones you care about." "That's not protection, Dad. That's fear." Sophia's words hit him like a physical blow. "You're not protecting her. You're hiding." In her mansion across town, Eleanor sat in her vast living room, the space seeming to mock her with its emptiness. The phone sat silent on the coffee table before her, as it had for days. She'd tried every possible way to reach Samuel, his old number, his previous address, even driving by his apartment, only to find new tenants moving in. The art supplies she'd bought for Sophia still sat wrapped in the corner, a reminder of plans never fulfilled. She'd imagined teaching the girl to paint, watching her talent bloom under proper instruction. She'd dreamed of quiet evenings with Samuel, sharing stories over tea, building a life that had nothing to do with stock prices or board meetings. "Samuel," she whispered into the silence, his name a prayer in the gathering dark. "Where are you?" Her fingers found the simple cross necklace at her throat, a habit she'd picked up from watching Samuel touch his own worn silver cross when deep in thought. The hymn he'd sung that night in the office played in her mind, a melody of loss and hope intertwined. The mansion's security system beeped, reminding her to set it for the night. Once, such technology had made her feel safe. Now, it only emphasized her isolation. She thought of Samuel's small apartment, how warm it had felt despite its modest size, filled with Sophia's artwork and the smell of home-cooked meals. Eleanor's gaze drifted to the wall of achievements, awards, certificates, newspaper clippings chronicling her business success. They seemed hollow now, mere paper and glass, nothing compared to the real treasure she'd found in Samuel's gentle strength and unwavering integrity. She reached for her phone one more time, though she knew it was futile. The screen lit up with notifications, messages from board members, business associates, society friends, all demanding explanations or offering false sympathy. But nothing from the one person she longed to hear from. "Samuel," she whispered again, his name carrying all the longing in her heart. The phone remained silent, offering no answers, no comfort, only the reflection of her own solitary face in its dark screen. The morning news blared from Sophia's phone as she prepared breakfast. She nearly dropped the spatula when she heard her father's name. Breaking news. Samuel Ortiz, the janitor who captured Millionaire CEO Eleanor Whitmore's heart, faces allegations of theft from his previous employer. Marcus Reynolds, owner of Reynolds Manufacturing, claims Ortiz stole equipment worth thousands of dollars 7 years ago. Sophia's hands trembled as she turned off the stove and rushed to her father's room. "Dad, Dad, wake up!" Samuel was already sitting on the edge of his bed, his weathered face drawn with worry as he listened to the same news on his small radio. His shoulders slumped, and he looked older than Sophia had ever seen him. "It's not true," Sophia insisted, sitting beside him. "I know you'd never steal anything." Samuel's eyes filled with tears. "Mija." He took her hand, his calloused fingers wrapping around hers. "There's something I never told you about that time." Across town, Eleanor sat in her kitchen, watching the same news report on her tablet. Her coffee grew cold as she stared at Samuel's photo on the screen, her heart aching. The man she knew, Gentle, honest, hard-working Samuel couldn't be a thief, yet doubt crept in like a shadow. Her phone buzzed with messages from former board members, all saying variations of, "We told you so." Eleanor switched it off, unable to bear their smugness. Back in their small apartment, Samuel made Sophia sit down at their tiny kitchen table. "Remember when we first moved here, after I left Reynolds Manufacturing?" Sophia nodded. "I was 10. You said it was time for a fresh start. There was a man I worked with there, David Martinez." Samuel's voice grew soft with memory. His wife was sick, cancer. They had 3 young children. He was desperate for money for her treatments. Understanding dawned in Sophia's eyes. "He took the equipment?" Samuel nodded slowly. "I found him trying to sell it. He was crying, Sophia. Said his wife needed an experimental treatment their insurance wouldn't cover." He rubbed his face wearily. "When security cameras showed someone in the storage area that night, I told them it was me." "Oh, Papa," Sophia whispered, her heart breaking for her father's sacrifice. "Mr. Reynolds offered not to press charges if I resigned quietly. David kept his job. His wife got her treatment." Samuel's eyes grew distant. She lived another 5 years, long enough to see their youngest graduate elementary school. Sophia squeezed her father's hand. "But why didn't you ever tell anyone the truth? David's children still need their father. He's built a good life now, supports his family honestly." Samuel shook his head. "I couldn't destroy that." Across the city, Eleanor sat in her home office, surrounded by newspaper clippings and online articles about Samuel's supposed theft. Her investigator's preliminary report lay unopened on her desk. She couldn't bring herself to read it, afraid of what she might find. The media was having a field day. "Janitor's criminal past exposed," screamed one headline. "Whitmore's Prince Charming revealed as common thief," declared another. Each word felt like a knife in Eleanor's heart. Sophia watched her father leave for his new job, his steps heavy with the weight of renewed shame. She pulled out her sketchbook, the one Eleanor had praised during their dinner at the mansion. The memory of Eleanor's kindness, her genuine interest in Sophia's art, her warm smile when looking at her father, it all came flooding back. "This isn't right," Sophia muttered, pulling out a fresh piece of paper. Her hand shook as she began to write. "Dear Eleanor, my father is the most honest man I know. The story they're telling about him isn't true, but the real truth is even more important. He sacrificed everything to save another family." Sophia poured out everything her father had told her, describing David's desperate situation, her father's choice, and the years of quiet dignity that followed. Her tears smudged some of the words, but she kept writing. "He didn't tell you because he never tells anyone about the good things he does. He doesn't think they matter, but they matter to me, and I think they'd matter to you too. My father taught me that real love means sometimes carrying someone else's burden. He did it for David's family then, and I've seen how he lights up when he talks about you now. Please don't believe what they're saying about him. Believe in the man who fixes broken things, who hums hymns while he works, who would rather hurt himself than hurt others. He loves you, Eleanor, even if he won't say it, even if he thinks he needs to protect you by staying away. Sincerely, Sophia Ortiz." She folded the letter carefully, wrote Eleanor's name and address on an envelope, and sealed it before she could lose her courage. Her allowance money would cover the express delivery. Her father had taught her that truth matters more than money, and now it was her turn to prove it. The letter arrived on Eleanor's doorstep on a rainy Tuesday morning. Her housekeeper brought it in with the rest of the mail, but this one was different. A simple white envelope with slightly messy handwriting that could only belong to a teenager. Eleanor's hands shook as she recognized Sophia's name in the return address. She settled into her favorite armchair by the window, where she and Samuel had once shared tea, and carefully opened the envelope. "Dear Miss Whitmore," the letter began, "you probably don't want to hear from me, but my father is innocent, and you need to know the truth." Eleanor's breath caught as she read Sophia's careful explanation. 7 years ago, at Reynolds Manufacturing, a young single mother named Maria Rodriguez had been desperate. Her son was sick, and she'd been stealing small parts to sell for extra money. Samuel had caught her one night, but instead of reporting her, he'd listened to her story. The next day, Sophia wrote. When Mr. Reynolds discovered the missing equipment, my father claimed he had taken it. He knew Maria would lose everything if she was fired. Dad says sometimes doing the right thing means being willing to look wrong in other people's eyes. Tears splashed onto the paper as Eleanor read. This was Samuel, exactly the man she'd come to know, the one who fixed other people's problems without seeking credit, the one who saw worth in everyone, even when they couldn't see it in themselves. She pressed the letter to her chest, then reached for her phone. "James," she said to her longtime private investigator, "I need everything you can find on Reynolds Manufacturing, specifically about an employee named Maria Rodriguez from 7 years ago." Over the next 3 days, Eleanor barely slept. She pored over employment records, bank statements, and medical bills that James uncovered. The story emerged piece by piece. Maria Rodriguez had indeed worked at Reynolds. Her son had been diagnosed with a rare kidney condition, and she'd left the company shortly after the theft incident, but not before Samuel had helped her find a better-paying job at a hospital. Eleanor's fury grew with each revelation. How dare they drag Samuel's name through the mud when he'd acted with such compassion? She tracked down Maria herself, now a successful nurse supervisor, who broke down crying when she heard Samuel's name. "He saved my life," Maria admitted in Eleanor's office. "My son would have died without those treatments. I wanted to come forward when I heard the news, but Mr. Ortiz made me promise never to tell. He said my son needed me more than he needed his reputation." Eleanor's heart swelled with pride and ache. "Would you be willing to tell the truth now?" she asked gently. "To help the man who helped you?" Maria straightened her shoulders. "For Mr. Ortiz? Anything." The next morning, Eleanor called an emergency press conference. She stood at the podium, her silver hair gleaming under the lights, her voice steady with purpose. 7 years ago, a man chose to sacrifice his reputation to save a family. Today, I'm here to tell you the true story of Samuel Ortiz. As she spoke, cameras flashed and reporters scribbled. She laid out the evidence methodically: Maria's testimony, the hospital records, the timeline of events. When she finished, the room was silent. "Samuel Ortiz," Eleanor declared, her voice thick with emotion, "is the most honorable man I've ever known. He didn't steal anything, except my heart." Back in her office, Eleanor studied the latest information James had gathered about Samuel's whereabouts. He'd taken a job at a small private school 2 towns over, still cleaning floors, still providing for his daughter. Her fingers traced his address on the paper. She thought of all the nights they'd shared quiet conversations, how he'd shown her that true wealth had nothing to do with money, how he'd taught her that love wasn't about status or power, but about seeing the divine in ordinary moments. Eleanor stood and grabbed her car keys. She didn't care about her lost position as CEO anymore. She didn't care what anyone thought. All that mattered was finding Samuel and showing him that his sacrifice hadn't gone unnoticed, that someone understood the depth of his character and loved him all the more for it. She paused only long enough to text Sophia. "I'm coming to find your father. Thank you for helping me see the truth." The reply came quickly. "He's working late tonight. He always does on Tuesdays." Eleanor smiled, remembering how Samuel had always stayed late on Tuesdays at her company too, making sure every detail was perfect. Some things never changed. She grabbed her coat and headed for the door, her heart racing with determination. The truth had finally come to light. Now it was time to bring Samuel home. The afternoon sun streamed through the wide windows of Franklin Middle School's cafeteria. Eleanor Whitmore stood in the doorway, her heart pounding as she watched Samuel on his knees, methodically scrubbing the linoleum floor. He looked thinner than she remembered, his shoulders carrying an invisible weight. The room smelled of industrial cleaner and leftover lunch. Empty tables stood like silent witnesses, their chairs neatly stacked on top. The squeak of Samuel's cleaning brush against the floor echoed in the vast space. Eleanor took a deep breath and stepped forward, her heels clicking against the clean portion of the floor. Samuel continued working, not looking up. He was used to people walking through while he cleaned. "Samuel," she said softly. The brush clattered to the floor. Samuel froze, still on his knees, his back to her. She could see the tension ripple through his shoulders. "Eleanor?" His voice was barely a whisper. What are you doing here? Looking for you. She moved closer, careful to stay on the dry part of the floor. You disappeared without saying goodbye. Samuel picked up his brush again, his movements mechanical. It was better that way, for everyone. Better? Eleanor's voice cracked. Do you have any idea what these past weeks have been like? Not knowing where you were, if you were okay? I saw the newspapers, Samuel said, still not looking at her. What they did to you. Your company. I don't care about the company. Eleanor's words echoed off the walls. I care about you. Samuel finally turned, his dark eyes meeting hers. How can you say that? I cost you everything. Eleanor pulled Sophia's letter from her purse. I know about what happened at your old job, Samuel. About the coworker you protected. The color drained from his face. Sophia wrote to you? She told me everything. How you took the blame when money went missing from the register. How you let them fire you instead of a single mother who made a desperate mistake. Eleanor's voice softened. Why didn't you tell me? Samuel looked down at his worn hands, still wet from cleaning. It was a long time ago. It didn't matter anymore. It matters to me. Eleanor moved closer, her expensive shoes now touching the wet floor. You're a good man, Samuel Ortiz. The best man I've ever known. Please, he said, his voice rough. Don't make this harder. Look at me, I'm just a janitor. Again, always. He gestured at his uniform, at the bucket beside him. And you're Eleanor Whitmore. No. Eleanor shook her head firmly. I'm just Eleanor, a woman who misses talking to you. Who misses your smile, your quiet strength? She took another step forward, water seeping into her shoes. Who misses the way you see the world with such kindness, such grace? Samuel struggled to his feet, backing away. The board was right. We're from different worlds. Then I choose your world. Eleanor's voice was firm. I choose a world where people help each other, where they sing hymns while they work, where they put others before themselves. She moved closer still. I choose you, Samuel. Eleanor, please. His voice broke. I can't bear to hurt you again. The only thing hurting me is your absence. She closed the distance between them, her clothes now spotted with water from the floor. I don't care what anyone thinks anymore. I don't care about titles or reputations or social circles. Samuel's hands trembled at his sides. What about your life? Everything you've built? I built a prison of wealth and expectations. Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. You showed me what real richness looks like. It's in Sophia's drawings. It's in your neighbors who wave hello. It's in the way you make everyone feel valued, no matter who they are. She knelt beside him on the wet floor, her expensive suit soaking up the cleaning water. Samuel stared at her, shocked. Eleanor, your clothes are just clothes. She reached for his hand, gripping it tightly. Please come home, she whispered. Please come back to me. Samuel stood frozen, looking down at their joined hands, his calloused from work, hers soft and manicured. In that moment, the differences between them seemed both vast and meaningless, like stars that looked far apart, but were part of the same constellation. The afternoon sun painted long shadows across the cafeteria floor, and in the quiet space between them, Eleanor held her breath, waiting for his answer. The setting sun painted long shadows across Eleanor's estate as she and Samuel walked through the echoing halls. Moving boxes lined the walls, and sheets draped the elegant furniture like ghosts of her former life. Their footsteps resonated on the marble floors, a sound Samuel knew well from his years of maintaining similar surfaces. Eleanor's hand rested lightly on Samuel's arm as they moved through the grand foyer. The crystal chandelier above cast rainbow prisms across their faces, a final dance of light before it too would be carefully packed away. It feels different now, Samuel said softly, taking in the half-empty space. Less intimidating, Eleanor offered with a gentle smile. That's how I always felt about it, if I'm honest. Like I was living in a museum instead of a home. They paused by the sweeping staircase where family portraits once hung, their absence leaving lighter patches on the wallpaper. Samuel touched one of these spaces thoughtfully. But this is your legacy, he said. Your family's history. Are you sure about selling it? Eleanor turned to face him, her eyes bright with purpose. "I've been thinking a lot about legacy lately, about what really matters." She gestured to the grand space around them. "This house, the company, they were never truly mine. They were obligations I inherited, golden chains that kept me from following my heart." Samuel shifted uncomfortably. "Eleanor, I can't let you give up everything because of me. The scandal will pass. You could rebuild." "I don't want to rebuild the old life," she interrupted, taking his weathered hands in hers. "I want to build something new, something that matters." She squeezed his fingers gently. "I'm starting a foundation, using my fortune to help families in need, provide scholarships, create opportunities." Samuel's throat tightened. That's wonderful. But I don't want to be a burden to you. I'm just a—" "Don't you dare say just a janitor," Eleanor said firmly. "You're the man who taught me more about dignity and integrity than all the corporate executives I've ever known." She released his hands and walked to one of the covered paintings, pulling the sheet away to reveal a valuable abstract piece. "What do you see when you look at this?" Samuel studied the painting, his expression thoughtful. "Honestly, I see confusion, chaos, trying to look important." Eleanor laughed, a warm, genuine sound that filled the empty house. "Exactly. I've spent my whole life surrounded by things that were supposed to be valuable, but they never filled the emptiness inside." She moved closer to him, her eyes soft. "But then I met a man who hums hymns while he works, who took blame for someone else's mistake because he knew she needed the job more than he did, who raised a daughter with such love and grace that she'd write to a stranger to defend his honor." Samuel's eyes glistened as he looked away. "I'm not perfect, Eleanor. I've made plenty of mistakes." "We all have," she said, reaching up to turn his face back to hers. "But you've shown me what real treasure looks like. It's not in bank accounts or boardrooms. It's in the way you treat people, the way you love, the way you've taught me to love again." Tears spilled onto Samuel's cheeks. "I never thought," he whispered, his voice rough with emotion. "When Maria died, I thought that part of my life was over. That Sophia would be the only love left for me." Eleanor stepped closer, her hand gentle on his face. "Life surprises us sometimes," she murmured, "gives us second chances when we least expect them." Samuel closed his eyes, leaning slightly into her touch. "Are you sure about this? About all of it?" "I've never been more sure of anything," Eleanor said softly. Then, with infinite tenderness, she leaned forward and pressed her lips to his. The autumn breeze carried the scent of fresh paint and new beginnings as crowds gathered outside the renovated brick building in downtown. A large banner stretched across the entrance, "Whitmore Ortiz Community Foundation, Opening Day." The morning sun warmed the faces of those assembled, families, local business owners, and city officials all mingling together. Eleanor stood at the podium, her silver hair catching the light. She wore a simple blue dress instead of her usual designer suits, and her smile reached her eyes in a way it never had in corporate boardrooms. Samuel stood beside her, dignified in a pressed white shirt and tie, his weathered hands clasped in front of him. "Welcome, everyone," Eleanor began, her voice clear and warm. "This foundation represents not just a new chapter for me and Samuel, but a promise to our community. Every person deserves a chance to pursue their dreams, regardless of their circumstances." Samuel stepped forward, his quiet presence commanding attention in its own way. "When I was raising Sophia alone, working nights as a janitor, I wished for something like this. A place that sees people for who they are, not what they own or where they work." The crowd applauded as Eleanor and Samuel cut the ribbon together. Inside, the building hummed with activity. The main hall featured desk spaces where staff helped families apply for scholarships and job training programs. The walls, once stark white, now displayed local artwork, bringing color and life to every corner. Sophia darted between groups, her art supplies clutched to her chest, leading children toward the new art room. Her eyes sparkled with purpose as she showed them how to hold brushes and mix colors. She had found her calling here, teaching others to express themselves through art, just as she did. "Look at her," Samuel whispered to Eleanor, watching Sophia demonstrate a painting technique to a young girl. "She's blooming." Eleanor squeezed his hand. "Just like her father," she said softly. "You both have so much to give." Throughout the morning, families filled out applications while volunteers served coffee and pastries. Eleanor sat with each applicant, listening to their stories with genuine interest. She heard about single mothers working 3 jobs, teenagers supporting siblings, and elderly folks struggling to make ends meet. A woman named Maria approached Samuel, tears in her eyes. "I remember when you used to fix the heating in our apartment building," she said. "You never made us feel ashamed when we couldn't pay right away, and now look at you, still helping people, just in a bigger way." Samuel embraced her warmly. "We're all in this together, Maria. Always have been." Near noon, Sophia gathered everyone in the main hall. A large canvas hung on the wall, covered by a sheet. Her hands trembled slightly as she gripped the edge of the fabric. "I've been working on this for weeks," she announced, her voice steady despite her nerves. "It's my way of showing what this foundation means, not just to me, but to all of us." With a gentle tug, the sheet fell away. The mural burst with color and life, depicting the city skyline transformed into a garden of possibility. In the center, rendered with loving detail, stood Samuel and Eleanor, their hands clasped together. Around them, people of all ages and backgrounds reached toward stars that rained down like golden opportunities. The entire piece radiated hope and unity, each brushstroke carrying Sophia's heart. A collective gasp rose from the crowd, followed by applause. Eleanor pressed her hand to her mouth, tears welling in her eyes. Samuel wrapped an arm around his daughter, his pride visible in every line of his face. "Mi corazón," he whispered to Sophia. "It's beautiful." Eleanor stepped forward to join them, forming a small family unit before the mural. Community members approached one by one, adding their own stories and gratitude. A local teacher praised the new after-school programs. A mechanic spoke about the job training initiative. Each voice added to the tapestry of community that Eleanor and Samuel had woven together. The foundation's staff, a diverse group carefully chosen for their compassion and dedication, moved through the crowd, helping people sign up for various programs. Many were folks Samuel had known from his years of maintenance work, now employed in positions that used their unique skills and knowledge of the community's needs. As the afternoon sun slanted through the windows, Eleanor watched Samuel showing a group of teenagers how to properly maintain the building's heating system. His expertise, once hidden in late-night shifts, now served as valuable lessons for the next generation. He caught her eye and smiled, the same gentle expression that had first warmed her heart in those quiet evening conversations so long ago. Sophia's mural presided over it all, a testament to the power of looking past surfaces to see the true worth in every person. The painted hands of Samuel and Eleanor, joined together in the center of the piece, reminded everyone that love could bridge any divide when given the chance to grow. The foundation had opened its doors, and with it, countless possibilities for a community ready to rise together, supporting each other step by step, dream by dream. Eleanor stood at the entrance of the foundation, her hands fidgeting with her pearl necklace. The morning sun cast long shadows across the freshly painted walls, and the excited chatter of the gathering crowd filled the air. But her eyes kept darting to the street, searching for one particular face she hadn't seen in 5 years. "He'll come," Samuel said softly, placing his weathered hand over hers. "You sent the invitation from your heart. That matters." Eleanor managed a small smile, drawing strength from Samuel's quiet confidence. Sophia stood nearby, arranging flowers in beautiful handmade vases, humming the same hymn her father often sang. A black sedan pulled up to the curb. Eleanor's breath caught in her throat as a tall man with silver-streaked hair stepped out. Thomas Whitmore, her older brother, straightened his tie and looked up at the building's facade. "Tommy," Eleanor whispered, using the childhood nickname she hadn't spoken in years. Samuel squeezed her hand. "Go to him." Eleanor walked down the steps, her heels clicking against the concrete. Thomas turned at the sound, and for a moment, brother and sister stood frozen, years of unspoken words hanging between them. "The invitation surprised me," Thomas said finally, his voice gruff but uncertain. "I wasn't sure you'd come," Eleanor admitted. Thomas gestured to the banner above. "Whitmore Ortiz," he read aloud. Dad would have. He paused, swallowing hard. He would have been proud to see his name next to someone who understands the value of honest work. Tears pricked at Eleanor's eyes. "You've met Samuel?" "No," Thomas shook his head. "But I've been reading about him. About both of you. The papers got it wrong, Ellie, and so did I, when I sided with the board." Samuel approached slowly, giving the sibling space but offering his steady presence. Sophia trailed behind him, carrying one of her flower arrangements. "Mr. Whitmore," Samuel said, extending his hand. "Your sister has told me so much about you." Thomas grasped Samuel's hand firmly. "All good things, I hope?" "She said you were the stubborn one," Samuel replied with a gentle smile, "but also the one who always stood up for her on the playground." Thomas laughed, a rich sound that seemed to break through the last of the tension. "She was the one who needed looking after back then, always with her nose in a book, didn't see the bullies coming." "And you were the one who taught me to throw a proper punch," Eleanor added, her voice warm with memory. Sophia stepped forward, offering the vase of flowers. "These are for you, Mr. Whitmore." Eleanor, said blue was your favorite color." Thomas accepted the flowers, visibly moved by being called uncle so naturally. "These are beautiful. You must be Sophia. I hear you're quite the artist." "She painted the mural inside," Eleanor said proudly. "Would you like to see it?" The four of them walked into the foundation building together. The main hall was filled with light from tall windows, and Sophia's mural stretched across the far wall, a vibrant scene of people helping people, hands joining hands, creating a tapestry of community and hope. "This is extraordinary," Thomas breathed, studying the details. "You captured something special here, Sophia." "It's what they taught me," Sophia said, glancing at her father and Eleanor. "That love doesn't care about what's in your wallet or what job you do. It cares about what's in your heart." Thomas turned to Eleanor, his eyes glistening. "I was wrong, Ellie. When you left the company, I thought you were throwing everything away. But you weren't throwing away anything. You were finally finding what mattered." Eleanor leaned against Samuel, drawing strength from his solid presence. "I found my family," she said simply. "It just looks different than I expected." "Speaking of family," Samuel interjected warmly, "we were hoping you'd join us for dinner tonight. Sophia's making her mother's enchiladas, and I hear you make a mean apple pie." "You remembered," Thomas said to Eleanor, surprised. "After all these years?" "Every Sunday dinner," Eleanor nodded. "Mom would make the roast, and you'd bring the pie. I've missed those dinners, Tommy." Thomas looked at the three faces before him, his sister's hopeful smile, Samuel's kind eyes, Sophia's artistic spirit, and saw the family Eleanor had built. "I'd be honored," he said, "but only if you'll let me bring the pie." That evening, the once empty mansion, filled with the aromas of cooking and the sounds of laughter. In the kitchen, Sophia and Thomas rolled out pie crust while Samuel and Eleanor set the table, their comfortable domesticity a stark contrast to the formal dinners of Eleanor's past. "Remember when you tried to bake a pie for Dad's birthday?" Thomas asked, flour dusting his expensive suit. "The smoke alarm went off and the fire department came." Eleanor groaned. "I was 12, and you were supposed to be watching the timer." "I was distracted by the comic book you lent me," Thomas defended, making Sophia giggle. Samuel watched the siblings with quiet joy, seeing Eleanor's face light up as she and Thomas traded childhood stories. The walls of the mansion seemed to warm with each burst of laughter, each shared memory. When they finally sat down to dinner, Eleanor looked around her table, Samuel's strong hands folding in prayer, Sophia's artistic fingers arranging the napkins just so, Thomas's familiar profile softened by candlelight, and felt her heart swell. The empty spaces in her life, the ones she'd tried to fill with corporate success and material wealth, were finally full. "Before we eat," Thomas said, raising his glass, "I'd like to make a toast. To my sister, who had the courage to choose love over everything else. To Samuel, who showed us all what true dignity looks like. To Sophia, who brings beauty wherever she goes. And to family, the one we're born with, and the one we choose." The glasses clinked, and as they began passing dishes around the table, Eleanor caught Samuel's eye. His gentle smile told her everything she needed to know, that sometimes the greatest blessings come disguised as losses, and that love, in all its unexpected forms, has the power to heal even the deepest wounds. The quiet hum of the air conditioning filled the empty office floor of Whitmore Enterprises. Moonlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting long shadows across the marble floors. Samuel Ortiz guided his broom with the same careful attention he'd always shown, though now a gentle smile played on his lips. Eleanor stood nearby, her elegant frame leaning against a desk. She'd traded her power suits for a simple cream sweater and slacks, and her silver hair caught the moonlight. Her eyes followed Samuel's methodical movements with undisguised affection. "You still sweep in perfect lines," she said softly, walking over to stand beside him. "Even after all these months." Samuel paused, looking up at her with warm brown eyes. "Old habits die hard, mi amor." He gestured to the conference room down the hall. "Remember that night you left your purse in there?" Eleanor's laugh echoed through the empty office. "How could I forget? I was so distracted that evening, thinking about quarterly reports." She moved closer, placing her hand on his arm. "Little did I know that forgetting my purse would change my life forever." Samuel set his broom against the wall and took her hands in his. They were different hands, his weathered and calloused from years of manual labor, hers smooth and manicured. But they fit together perfectly. "I almost took it to Lost and Found," he admitted, "but something made me bring it to your office instead." "Divine intervention," Eleanor whispered, squeezing his hands. "I was so lonely back then, rattling around in that huge mansion, thinking my bank account could fill the empty spaces in my heart." Samuel pulled her closer, his voice growing soft with memory. "I was lonely too. Sophia was my whole world, but there was still this ache." He touched Eleanor's cheek gently. "I never dreamed I'd find love again after Maria passed." "Look at us now," Eleanor said, gesturing around the office. "Who would have thought the CEO and the janitor would end up here?" Samuel chuckled, retrieving his broom. "The board certainly didn't. The board can take their opinions and—" Eleanor stopped herself, but her eyes twinkled mischievously. "Well, let's just say I'm happier now than I ever was in that corner office." They moved together down the hallway, Samuel sweeping while Eleanor straightened chairs and collected forgotten coffee cups. It had become their ritual, helping with the night cleaning whenever they visited the Foundation's offices in the building. For Eleanor, it was a reminder of how far they'd come. For Samuel, it was a testament to the dignity of honest work. "Sophia's art program is really taking off," Samuel said proudly. 20 students enrolled this month." Eleanor beamed. "She has your gift for helping others feel seen and valued." She paused by the window, looking out at the city lights. "Remember how nervous she was at that first dinner at the mansion? Now she practically runs the place," Samuel laughed. "Between the foundation and her teaching, she's flourishing." They worked their way through the office in comfortable silence, their movements synchronized after months of sharing this routine. When they reached Eleanor's old office, now occupied by the Foundation's education director, they both stopped. "This is where you first really talked to me," Samuel said, touching the doorframe. "Where you shared your dream of teaching." Eleanor leaned against him, her head resting on his shoulder. "And now we're helping others achieve their dreams. It feels right, doesn't it? Like this was always where we were meant to end up." Samuel set down his broom and wrapped his arms around her waist. "More than right, it feels like grace." They stood there for a moment, surrounded by the quiet of the building where their unlikely love story began. Through the windows, the first hints of dawn began to paint the sky in soft pinks and purples. "Ready to head home?" Samuel asked, collecting his cleaning supplies. Eleanor nodded, taking his free hand in hers. "Home," she repeated softly. Not the lonely mansion or the modest apartment, but their new place. Smaller, warmer, filled with Sophia's artwork and the sound of laughter. Together, they walked toward the elevator, their footsteps echoing in the empty hallway. The same hallway where they'd once exchanged polite nods, both hiding their pain behind careful masks. Now their fingers were intertwined, their steps matched, and their hearts beat as one. The elevator dinged, and they stepped inside. Eleanor looked at their reflection in the polished doors, the former CEO and the janitor, now partners in every sense of the word. Samuel caught her eye in the reflection and smiled, the same gentle smile that had first cracked the walls around her heart. "I love you," he said simply. "I love you too," she replied, squeezing his hand. The elevator descended, carrying them toward the lobby, where the sunrise waited. Their story had become a whispered legend in the building. How love had bridged the gap between their worlds. How faith had given them the courage to choose each other. How serving others had brought them their greatest joy. The doors opened to reveal the first golden rays of morning streaming through the lobby's glass walls. Hand in hand, they walked toward the light, ready to embrace whatever the new day might bring. What would you do if you were in their place? Comment your answer below, and let's see how you'd rewrite the ending. If you enjoyed the story of Samuel Ortiz, I handpicked the next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.